Welcome, lovely people. Today we are going to be doing our second episode of our Bhakti Wednesday series called Devotional Mysticism and Plant Teachers. And today's episode, we're going to focus on a very sacred plant that I think is such a beautiful one for really opening up this box of wisdom of plant knowledge. And so we're going to be talking about roses. Today's talk is sponsored by or is hosted by Nightlight Astrology, and also Sky House Herb School and Urban Devi. And so I am going to be speaking from my experience as an herbalist about the plants, and also my morsels of experience in Bhakti Yoga. And Rukmini Walker is here with us today from Urban Devi, and she has such a beautiful depth of wisdom to speak about this from many different mystical traditions, including over 50 years of experience in Bhakti Yoga. So welcome, Rukmini. I'm so happy that you're back here today to speak with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, my pleasure. And I just want to point people back. If you guys haven't had a chance, sorry, my phone was there and I know it's gonna buzz. It always does that at the most inopportune time. So, but I wanted to point you all back to the very first episode that we did our introduction, because I want you to be able to have a little bit of context for today's episode, and also to hear a little bit more about Rukmini Walker's background, her contact information, more ways to engage with her. So please do, you don't have to stop right now, but please do listen back to that first talk, because it'll give you some really rich resources and ways to think about today's conversation. So let's open up. Maybe, Rukmini, could you start us off and open up this space of exploration with some prayers?
I'd love to. Thank you. What an honor. I'll chant some prayers in Sanskrit and some in English. Om Ajnana-timirandasya Yananjana Salakaya Chaksun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I offer my respects to my teachers who have opened my eyes. While I was standing in the darkness of ignorance, they've opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. And here's a prayer I love very much. I'll just share the English with you. This is from the Srimad Bhagavatam, or Bhagavat Purana, spoken by the little boy saint, Prahlad Maharaj. It says, I just feel this prayer is so pertinent right now in our world. May the entire universe be blessed with peace and good hope. May everyone driven by envy and enmity become pacified and reconciled. May all living beings develop abiding concern for the welfare of others. May our own hearts and minds be filled with purity and serenity. May all these blessings flow naturally from this one supreme benediction. May our attention become spontaneously absorbed in the rapture of love unto the transcendent Lord.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I just find that opening these spaces with prayer and these sort of deep words of reflection and wisdom put us in the mindset to talk about these topics in a deeper way. And to me, when I was listening to Prahlad's prayer, just calling back to the heart and to this spontaneous devotion that comes through, that's very much the medicine of the rose. The rose is such a medicine of the heart, and a cleanser of the heart, an inspirer of the heart. So maybe we can just, begin with this and begin with reflections on the rose in a larger way. And what are some of the ways that you speak or you think about the rose, and why, what is its mystical qualities that stand out to you?
Thank you so much. Yeah, the rose is a very sacred flower in mystical poetry, and it represents the spiritual realm and the mysteries and the beauty of the spiritual path. And the red rose represents the red heart, right? The red heart of the one on the spiritual path. And it represents the journey on the mystic path toward wholeness and the path toward becoming a complete human being.
Mm.
And one other point I want to share is that our heart contains inside of it the beauty and the purity that's so similar to the rose. And it's during life, just living, during the course of living, that scent becomes revealed, just as the rose gradually opens from a bud into a full-blown flower, right? So just by living that, gradually that scent becomes revealed. It's originally that beauty is originally invisible, but it's perceptible by those who can feel its presence. So yeah, those are some.
I love that. And, it reminds me of the story you shared about something that Prabhupada, your teacher, said to you very early on, which is, you are a beautiful girl, now become more beautiful inside. And isn't that the rose? It's like this bud, and this is, spiritual teachers, they see that bud. But your teacher so wisely was like, well, from the inside, become more beautiful. And then that's what allows that flowering, that opening, and then ultimately the giving of the pollen, the fragrance, the nectar, all of those things.
So beautiful. Yeah, the seeker's heart acts like a rose and blooms like a rose, and when this kind of state of inner beauty is found and achieved, the fragrance can be sensed, right? People come face to face with a person on the spiritual path or a realized person, and the fragrance of their heart, like the fragrance of a rose, becomes a guide that can bring people to the place of transcendence, or to bring them to their own heart, their own center, and in the present moment, and to the path of further progress. I love that there's a beautiful poem from the Islamic poet Rumi, where he says, and I love this so much, he says, forget your beard, everybody with a beard, forget your beard and self-importance. Be an invisible guide, like the scent of roses that show where the inner garden is. So I love that so much. And so I really think that someone on the spiritual path, in Bhakti, we say the devotee, the bhakta, the devotee of the Lord is like a lover who is perfuming herself to attract her only beloved. But along the way, she begins to attract everyone who crosses her path. So by anointing ourselves with this perfume of love to attract only our Lord, along the way, others become attracted as well.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And as you were saying that, and that image of the beard, I don't know if you've ever come across roses that don't have a scent. Unfortunately, more and more, they become so adulterated, and they've been bred for just the external beauty and just for their resilience, but not for that smell, which is part of their gift and part of how they're so attractive to bees. And so, on the spiritual path, I love this analogy too, because we can beautify the external, but there's no fragrance. We can be, that true spiritual work is such an inside job. That's what makes the sweetness and the fragrance.
Yeah, Yeah. That's, like, well, like any kind of fruit or vegetable, like tomatoes that are grown to be another something red, right?
Mm,
Grown to be so perfect in the marketplace, but then so often the taste is not there. So we're, on the spiritual path, we're looking for the fragrance and we're looking for the deep taste. This is in Bhakti, this is called rasa, the taste of relationship with divinity, the taste of relationship with the beloved. So,
mm,
so important.
yeah.
Go within.
Go
Right?
within and yeah, and that's and cultivate that nectar and that fragrance. And yeah, I love the image. There's you probably know this one where this is from, but I think it's in the Bhagavatam, but it's when Radha is having the conversation with the bee, and she's cursing Krishna because he's gone, and she's cursing the bee and tell Krishna never to come back. And this little bee is just and then suddenly she's like, no, but wait, no, don't tell him to leave, don't, please, he can come back anytime. And just but the bee would have never been there if the fragrance of the flowers wasn't there. That conversation can't happen without that presence, right? Without that
Right.
spiritual presence.
And the fragrance of her love. And
Uh-huh.
sometimes it's said, some commentators say that that bee was actually Krishna coming in the form of a bee because of the fragrance and the taste of her love. So
Beautiful. Oh, all attractive. Oh, so
I think we should talk about bees in one of our future conversations.
oh, that would be
So many
lovely.
beautiful images of bees.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm thinking too about a Persian myth that I came across when I was doing some research about roses. And in Persian myth, they place roses on the graves of those who pass because they believe that the rose is the only thing that can go with a person across the threshold to the afterlife. And I was just thinking about how beautiful that is, because there's so little we can actually take with us. What all of these possessions, all of these material things we accumulate in our lives, but what is the only thing that actually travels with us when we pass? And the rose represents love
Yeah,
and that
the
devotion,
fragrance, the
that fragrance.
fragrance of our love. Isn't that beautiful? The fragrance of our love goes with us. Yeah, you can't take anything with you, but what can you take? You can take your love. Your love goes with you.
Mm,
The love that you've cultivated in your life carries you with you, carries you to the next place. Even, you know, uh, whether that love, whatever kind of love, that whatever attachment we have carries us. Because it said that the body transfers, but the mind just transforms.
mm,
So the mind, like a fragrance, carries us to the next life, whatever it may be. And so someone on the spiritual path is looking for an eternal life in the spiritual realm, beyond the circus or merry-go-round, not so merry-go-round of,
mm.
of repeated birth and death.
Yeah. 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 And I love the subtlety of the mind as it's seen in the yoga tradition. It's it's such a subtle thing, but it's such a powerful thing. So, careful what we think, and what we're thinking about at the time of death. What are we thinking about? What holy names are crossing through the mind, or what images or what feelings or what fragrances are passing through as we make that transition. And for me, as a yoga teacher teaching asana for so many years, shavasana, I would say to my students, we practice shavasana, it's corpse pose, because we want to practice
Mm.
consciousness at the moment of death. And so every time we come to shavasana, corpse pose, notice what's on your mind. How
Mm.
can we refine it?
Beautiful. And the fact is that, whatever we think of, whatever we meditate on, whatever we're attached to in this life will come before our eyes in our last moments, like a film reel, whatever we're attached to. So that's why, bhakti or other spiritual paths, their cultivation. It's not just, it's a practice that it's like just like growing roses, right? We have to cultivate them. We have to turn over the soil. We have to use all of the natural protections to keep away infestation of unwanted bugs. So in our lives, we have unwanted bugs also, right?
Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. And rose is not, it's temperamental. It's not an easy plant to cultivate. It has very specific likes and dislikes. And here in Minnesota, we can only grow certain varieties. And there's a very particular way you have to tuck the heads, you have to tuck all the heads in, and then you have to create a little bed of straw around it to protect it through the winter. But it stays green. You can actually keep your roses green all winter long, even up here in the far north, by this method, this old ancient method of protecting them. And so, we can do the same thing in our spiritual life. Is when things get when the external conditions get really challenging, how do we
Beautiful.
bring ourselves back in and protect?
I was reading something about a man, I forget his name, but from France during World War II. His father and his grandfathers had all cultivated roses in France. And then when the war came, I believe it was World War I, he began sending, he called it the peace rose, and he began sending cuttings of his roses all over Europe as a message of peace to Germany and to everywhere. And so, yeah, isn't that a beautiful thing?
Wow. Yeah.
Cultivation of the heart and cultivation of peace between external enemies, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the rose isn't all, it's not, it is peace and beauty and love, but it also has thorns, and I think that's such an interesting part of this plant. Could you
Mm.
talk a little bit about, why do you think it has thorns? How do thorns relate to our spiritual lives?
Beautiful question, very deep question. Well, again, to bow to the poet Rumi, the wise person of the Middle East. He said that and I love this so much. He says that the rarest essence of the rose is in the thorn.
Mm,
Isn't that so inscrutable for us in a culture where, we just want to enjoy ourselves and have a good time and forget everything, but the rose is it represents wholeness. And during the spiritual journey toward connection, toward oneness, there always will be obstacles and difficulties. And those obstacles are represented by the thorns of the rose. And we have to journey through the trials, and there's no spiritual progress without those trials. So when we think of pain or waiting or separation or loss of a loved one, there's so many thorns that we encounter on the path, and they're necessary to approach that state of grace. And when we're seeking our own truth, we can advance and flourish on the mystical path despite the trials of the long journey. So the thorns on the rose symbolize our difficulties and our challenges in this world and the things we need to endure and leave behind. And I really believe that if we're not tested with life's challenges, it's not really possible for us to grow to really achieve spiritual realization. It's almost as though this is the way the world is designed, to have those pinpricks, as my Guru Prabhupada calls them, the pinpricks, or the pricks of the thorn. So I believe that when we're pushed to the brink, we're pushed to become something new, something unprecedented that we've never seen in ourselves. And there's no other way to reach that place. And I believe it's by design. So thorns are necessary in our travel from the here to the hereafter. And it's only by facing those thorns calmly and enduring their pricking with patience that grace and faith can come about, and that we can attain that mystic knowledge. I wanted to share one other thing. I don't know if any of you have ever heard or read about a woman. She was a simple village woman in the state of Maharashtra in India, and her name is Sindhu Tai Saptal, and she's called the mother of the orphans. So her story is a very, very long one, and a painful story. She became a whistleblower in her village. She called out a man who was sexually abusing the women in the village. She was thrown out by her, a quite ignorant husband. Anyway, it's a long, long story. But she said something very deeply wise, that she said, my path has been full of thorns, but I made friends with those thorns and my path became blessed.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, so beautiful. I love that from Sindhu Tai, such a dear mentor for us all.
Yeah, yeah. And, it's interesting. In herbal medicine, we use roses as a healer for sexual trauma, if that's one of its indications.
Wow.
And my teacher, Margie Flint, one of my teachers who lives in Massachusetts, she said that you use the white rose petals for children because it's a very gentle energy. And so you can just fill their bathtub with white rose petals if a child has experienced sexual or really any trauma. And that's very, very healing for them on a subtle body level. And as they get older into teenager, you could use like a light pink. And then for adults, we use red.
That's so interesting. So interesting. So the different manifestations of the rose, from gentle to, to the passion that's needed for, really the passion that's needed for the spiritual quest, right? The
Right.
hero's journey, the heroine's journey. Isn't that
Yes.
true? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it kind of, one thing, when I think of the rose, whenever I speak of rose or think of rose, I always think of this Neil Young song. I don't know if you've heard it before, but it's love is a rose, you better not pick it. It only grows when it's on the vine. A handful of thorns, and you know you've missed it. You lose your love when you say the word mine. And isn't
Yeah.
that beautiful?
So poignant, so poignant. So I think when we approach the spiritual path, there's a continuum. I think of it as the continuum, that we go from the realm of I and mine, the mine, this is me and this is mine, and me, mine, mine. And then we gradually come to the place of shanti in the yoga practice, which is like the nirvana place. It's like the 0 point, right? But then on the personalist paths, the Sufi path or the path of bhakti, then there's another side that goes past that shanti, and that is the place where the lover, the devotee, or the practitioner begins to think the beloved is mine, that nothing is mine. So if I pick that rose, it may wither, but the spiritual rose, the spiritual quest, the rose is meant to be offered to divinity, to the
Mm,
beloved, right?
yeah.
So that beloved is mine, even though nothing else is mine. There's nothing else I can take with me in those last moments, but my love for that beloved person.
Oh, thank you. That's so helpful because, sometimes I wonder, mine, we're kind of taught, yeah, to love, but to not, we want to possess, but we don't want to love. And in Bhakti, yeah, there's this, we want to possess, we want to possess in the spiritual, but we don't necessarily possessing in the material in
Yeah.
terms of that kind of love, like Neil Young was pointing to, we lose. We
So
we
true.
we lose our love when we have, and we're left with a handful of thorns if we try to
Mm.
grab at it in the material. But
And so true. And in bhakti, on the path of bhakti, it's not about detaching from all the things I love in this world, but it's about cultivating a positive attachment to that eternal beloved person. So, and teaching those I love about that beloved. So, you might think, oh, I'm not supposed to be attached to my kids, but show them the path to the beloved. Show them how to offer a rose to the beloved, that the rose is to be offered to the most beautiful person. So, yeah, I love that.
I love this. Yeah. Oh, and how about the charm of the rose? I was in Christianity, the rose was actually considered kind of a forbidden plant And it, because it was considered to be a pagan, a plant of the pagans, and a plant of Venus, which was associated with lust. But yet it's because it seems to have charmed even the Christians. How do you see the rose in Christianity? How what do you think happened to the hearts of people who at one time said no to the rose?
Right. The rose was too beautiful and it couldn't be rejected. So, in Christianity, during prayer and meditation, the fragrance of the rose has come to symbolize God's angels in the vicinity.
Mm.
And it's believed that roses have the most powerful energy and the highest vibration that's likened only to angels, because angels operate at a higher vibration so they can easily connect with roses, which I think is really amazing. And yeah, the rose represents heavenly joy. And then, of course, in the Song of Solomon in biblical literature, there's the Rose of Sharon. I'd like to find out more about the Rose of Sharon. I don't know more, but the Rose of Sharon is depicting the divine love between God and his people. And then the recitation of the rosary, right,
Oh, yes.
represents a garland of roses, the adoration of the Virgin Mary, because traditionally she's offered roses. And, I wanted to say that here in Washington, D.C., we have this beautiful shrine of the Immaculate Conception. And all the windows are these round stained glass windows, mandalas really, and they're all roses because that cathedral is offered to Mary. So all the windows are in the images of roses, yeah, to dedicated to Mary. So the
Wow.
rose was too beautiful and couldn't be rejected.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. And it lives on. I mean, it's here in the world with us at birthdays, on Valentine's Day, at funerals. The rose is such a part of our world still. We still can't resist it. It's, some of the greatest perfumers. There's a great book called The Emperor of Scent. I forget who wrote it, Chandler or something, but it's all about the history of perfumery. And rose was like one of the most sought after oils because it takes so many roses just to get a drop of the fragrance. So, I love how it still lives today. And one thing I often tell for when I'm working with my herbal clients and they're working on matters of the heart, I often say, go buy yourself some roses and just, get some bud vases and place one in your bathroom and one on your desk and one in your kitchen. Just spread them around your space because that, just even seeing the rose can open up the heart.
So beautiful. And rose water also symbolizes the colorless wine of the beloved
Ah,
that causes like a spiritual intoxication. And its fragrance is supposed to give signs of the fragrance of the beloved and who is the source of love, right?
mhm.
And rose water is also a symbol of passing from this worldly realm into the heavenly realm. And then drinking rose water clears and purifies the body, and as you're saying, helps ailments of the heart and helps access the soul. And it's a scent from this world to the eternal world.
Mm. Yeah, I was walking around my house gathering all my rose paraphernalia, and I grabbed some of my rose water here. And it's a nice one. I'll use it with my girls, just it's also just a gentle nervous system relaxant. So sometimes I'll just spray it on them, or before bed, I'll spray it on their pillow. And it just really relaxes because I feel like it puts us back in our heart, it calms the mind, puts us back into the place where we can be most receptive.
Mm, beautiful. Yeah, and the way a rosebud gradually opens and blooms and gives its beauty and aroma, in the same way the soul realizes herself on this path of loving devotion, and the beauty of the real spiritual form becomes revealed and fully blossoms into fruition.
Mm,
So I think, in Bhakti, there's this metaphor of well, I think in all spiritual paths, God is compared to the tree of life. And Sri Radha, who we just had her appearance day last week, she's like the vine that wraps herself around that tree of life, that loving vine. And the bhaktas, or the devotees, the people on the spiritual path, are like the leaves and flowers of that creeper, of that beautiful rose-like vine. And then the full-blown rose and the fruits and flowers of that devotion are the goals of the path of bhakti. I wanted to say something also that I think is beautiful. The path of bhakti is about divine love and relationship. And once my teacher Prabhupada, there was a sweet story. Someone brought him a beautiful rose, but without any leaves. And he said, "Where are the leaves?" And we think, oh, well, the beautiful part is the rose, the flower. But it's so interesting when we think that beauty is in the relationship, the flower and the leaves, or the jewel and the setting, or so that the beauty of the relationship, this is the ultimate spiritual beauty of the coming to the beloved as a lover, and the ultimate fulfillment of our deepest desires.
Yeah. Wow. It's for him to notice that. And, he was, from what I've heard, he's always just, his words were very precisely chosen. And so, yeah, I mean, how often do we just strip? We think we just have to strip off those leaves and thorns. And, but the beauty is in that relationship. That's such a beautiful image.
Yeah. And then going back to that thought of Rumi, that the rarest essence, we don't think of the thorns having the essence of the rose, but he says the rarest essence of the rose is in the thorns. So when we come across those thorn pricks or those pinpricks in our lives, I think it's important to pause and to take a deep breath and to ponder, why has this come to me? And what am I supposed to learn here? And then our path will be blessed.
Mm,
When we make friends with the thorns, as Sindhutai said, yeah?
yeah. Oh, what a lovely conversation. And the rose, I think, again, just such a beautiful way to open up this conversation about plants and spirituality, because they're such symbols, and they're available to us. They're you can grow these symbols. You can get them from your grocer or your florist. These are something that's we can have in our space to remind us of these greater teachings. Yeah.
And to become ourselves like an invisible fragrance, like a guide from the beyond, that, like to go through this world, like creating a fragrance of love, in such a subtle way, to uplift the world by, even in an invisible way, just like the invisible fragrance of a garden of roses. So beautiful to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Do we think we have time to share? I have that Mary Oliver poem on rose.
Oh, I love it. We
Could I
must.
read that? Okay. And then
Mary
I'd love
Oliver is always right on target, isn't she?
she is just, yeah, such a beautiful conduit of these teachings. So this is a poem, and then maybe you could close us with some closing thoughts.
Okay.
Okay. So this is called Roses by Mary Oliver. Everyone now and again wonders about those questions that have no ready answers. First cause, God's existence. What happens when the curtain goes down and nothing stops it? Not kissing, not going to the mall, not the Super Bowl. Wild roses, I said to them one morning. Do you have the answers? And if you do, would you tell me? The roses laughed softly. Forgive us, they said. But as you can see, we are just now entirely busy being roses.
So beautiful. So beautiful. So yeah, I think the rose is like a guru to us, right? The rose is like a guide from beyond. reminding us that we can also gradually open our hearts, that maybe our hearts are like a tightly closed bud right now, and we don't want to let anyone in, and we don't want to let any love in. But little by little, by the divine sunlight, the sweet rain, the good earth, right? We can open our hearts to love and go from this world to the next in a mood of treading lightly on the earth, but blessing the earth like an invisible fragrance of a rose.
Thank you so much, Rukmini, for your beautiful thoughts, inspirations, and yeah, just I think this is such a wonderful meditation to leave with. So thank you so much for joining us. And for those of you who want to learn more about Rukmini, there'll be some links for Urban Devi, her Patreon community group, where she teaches on Wednesday nights, and also a way to stay in touch and hear more about her ongoing teachings and work in the community, especially really uplifting the voices of women on the spiritual path. So please look out for her, find her work, follow her as closely as I do, and you will not be disappointed. The roses will start blooming and you'll be like, whoa. So thank you so much again. And we'll be back in a few weeks to explore another plant teacher.
Thank you so much, Ashley. And thank you for opening this beautiful conversation. I think there's some beautiful divine electricity between us. So I'm so grateful to you for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rukmini. And thank you everyone for watching. Please leave your comments. Please like this video. Please subscribe to all of our platforms so other people can find us. And if you have a friend who loves roses or you think might benefit from this talk, please forward it along to them. So thank you, everyone. Take care.